I'm going to wrap up chapter 4 on going from prophet to disciple, prophet to disciple. I didn't really get all the way through it, but I felt God lead me into the next chapter, which is going from a player to a preacher. And I want to talk on that tonight because I'm tired of playing. I mean, I've not been one to kind of lay back and just kind of diddy-daddle anyway. I'm pretty serious, and most of the time people don't know how to take me, or they don't really can't have much of a conversation with me outside of God stuff and the Bible and things like that, because I'm pretty focused, I'm pretty steadfast. But at the same time, I'm beginning to understand and realize even more as the attacks keep coming, as the onslaughts keep coming, and you just think, man, I don't know if I can go through another one. I don't know what else I could go take, and something else comes that you didn't think you'd ever be able to face, or you didn't ever be able to handle. And you know what, man, I just want to let the devil know, and any areas of attack that he might have, I want him to know that I'm done playing. We're not, and I'm not sure that I've really been playing, but I don't want to play with you no more. You ain't winning. You're going to lose. The scripture says that in the end, Christ will reign. That means your time on this earth is short. Yes. The battles that you're bringing against each and every one of us, I think that if you're anywhere affiliated with Heaven Today, you've probably been experiencing some type of spiritual warfare. And I could sit up here and say, hey, it's probably my fault, but it's not really. It's something that God wants, and it's His will for this ministry to be successful at whatever He's taking us into for the next season. And there's going to be trials, there's going to be storms, there's going to be things that are going to come upon our life. And I don't want to be shaken loose. I don't want to be shaken loose. I don't want to be the cause, or I don't want to be the effect of this is the reason why, or this ministry did. See, I heard that my whole life when I was a basketball player. When I mean, that's all I did. It's all I wanted to do. I put all of my eggs in one basket. From the time I was just 1 to 2 to 3. I mean, you could roll a ball across the floor and I would learn how to crawl for that ball. I mean, I went from crawling to walking, chasing a ball. You know what I mean? I mean, it was all about that ball, man. Everything in life, put every egg, everything in. I did not listen to anyone that said, you got to have options. You have got to have a backup plan. You have got to have an education. You have got to learn how to be a team player. This was naturally by God gifted with a court awareness, with an ability to get to the rim, with an ability to step back, with an ability to jump, it was something that I had an acute awareness to that just couldn't be explained. And I put everything in my life into that. So much so that I didn't learn how to live life without that. Everything revolved around that one thing. And oftentimes, I mean, as we grow up and as we're trying to find who we are and what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to be, generally there isn't a good balance. There'll be people in our life that are trying to show us, trying to teach us, trying to explain to us, trying to, but then there's this drive within us that just, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. This is what I'm going to, and for me, it was basketball. And when this God that I molded and shaped into for my life, that's what I did. It didn't have to be that way. There isn't anything sinful about sports. Paul references sports in the Bible, teaching us how to compete and how to compete right, how to go for, to be winners, to follow people that are winners, to learn how to fight and to run a race, to be patient. He teaches us through competition and athletics. It has a lot of good things and good fundamentals that go with it. But when you put everything into one basket without understanding the purpose and reason for your drive or your passion for it, and when it's all about you, it's not really about anyone else. It's just self-driven, self-focused. When it fails you, you're not left with anything. I mean, you're just left utterly hopeless. You're left broken. You're left a mess. You feel like you've been mistreated. You feel like you've been dumped on, or you feel like you haven't been sewn into in the right way. And for me, it was like for the next 20 years of my life, we could have did this. We could have done that. We would have went here. We would have went there. We would have did this thing. We would have done that thing if it hadn't have been for one incident or one. But you know what, man? That isn't what summed up the whole scenario at all. One incident, one decision, one choice. It all fell apart like that. But it would have been falling apart for a long, long, long time. See, I was a player. I wasn't just a basketball player. I played everything. I played everybody to be able to perform the one thing that I wanted to do and be successful at. For some people, it's to become rich and to become famous and to become well known, or to get the American dream, or even to get ahead in ministry. You know, we can even play the comfort card. You know, I just want to go to church and work 40-hour-a-week jobs and pay my tithes, be a good steward to the church, and not get out of my comfort zone, and just kind of play around with this thing that God's calling us to do in a serious, serious way. You know, I can't speak for anyone else. I can speak for myself. And I know that for myself, that when this was the only thing that I had this one thing that drove me, that I based all my decisions in life around this one thing. That means that during basketball season, I was a decent student. Good enough. Good enough. Knew what the bar was. Knew what kept me from playing. Knew what got me to play. So when off season come, I also knew what I could get away with and what I couldn't. I also knew that when the next school year came around, how much time I would have to get my grades back up to where I'd be ready to play again. I also knew which teachers was going to hold me at a higher standard of accountability. I also knew which counselors was going to recommend the right kind of classes to fit me. I also knew who I could go to and manipulate and get out of taking certain classes to get my schedule to line up with me in the way that I wanted my day to go. Yeah. And I would purposely choose teachers and purposely choose counselors that would let me get by with very little. I was a player. I played the system. I played everything because I had one goal. And that was to be a superstar. To be known, but yet not do very much to get it. And when that all fell apart, I began having to search for my identity. Everybody knew me. Diamond Dave, Dandy Dave, Duncan Dave. I mean, that was my identity. That's how I was known. We was ranked 10th in the state of Indiana. I was preseason all-state pick going into my senior year. And all of a sudden, I don't even know where I belong. I mean, it changed everything because everyone views you different and you begin to view life completely different because you want to be tough and you want to be, you don't want people to see you're weak. But at the same time, as you're looking to fit in, I don't have the same group of friends anymore because my friends are at basketball practice or traveling from game to game, week in and week out. I don't have the same people to run with anymore. My game's up. My playing days are over. They're gone. And the last place that I was going to look at that point in time in my life was to God. I wasn't going to look to God because I'd been playing my whole life. So I began to look to people that was in the same type of situation as I was. See, I wasn't very serious about a whole lot of things. So I looked for people that wasn't very serious about a whole lot of things. Didn't have very much responsibility, or had little upbringing at home, or had little accountability in their life. Friends whose parents didn't care when they came in or when they come home, when they went, where they went. That's what I was looking. I was looking for some type of freedom that I thought was freedom, but it was leading to much, much worse. So I began to find myself in places and in dope houses and I mean, it's like, you're 2 weeks in to really ever even experimenting with weed, but yet you're in places that it just don't feel right, man. It just don't feel right. But the longer you stay, the more comfortable it begins to feel. And the longer you stay, the harder your heart begins to get. The longer you stay, the easier it is to find something to kind of cover up the pain and the hurt. And I remember that basketball season, my senior year, I went to the very first game. I drove all the way to Scottsburg last minute. I didn't want to go. I'd been drinking all day. I'd hardly ever drunk in my life at that point in time. I'd been smoking weed all day. I'd never smoked weed really, but a few days before that. You know what I'm saying? So I get in my car. I drive all the way to Scottsburg. I get to the game. It's like third quarter. I watched the game from the stands, and I just bawled my eyes out, man. Everything, that every hour, every drill, every line, every suicide, everything that I had ever done since the time I was a little boy was gone. And I remember I just wanted to be on that bus. I just wanted to be with my friends. And I remember standing outside that bus, crying, bawling my eyes out. And I had some good friends, man. And they wanted to console me. They wanted to wrap their arms around me, and they wanted to love on me a little bit. But you know what, man? I was in a bad state, man. I was in a bad place. And you're talking about in the 80s, man, where Indiana basketball was Indiana basketball. Hall of Fame coach, man. He sees me out there. I'm disrupting his program. Still. I get it. You got to move on. You got to get out of here. Hit the road. You don't belong here anymore. I don't hold any regrets to that now. But for 20 years, that was what was always ringing in my mind, in my ears, is that the choices that I had to begin to make, it started a long time. It ain't no teacher's fault that passed me when they shouldn't have. I can remember before the sectionals, if he flunks this class, he doesn't play. Can he retake the test? All those perks didn't help. Listen, parents, coaches, teachers, if you want to save their life, hold them accountable.
Yes, amen.
Hold them accountable. Because when I was put to the pressure, to the test, to have to perform, that's when I would do it. But if I knew I could get over on you, if I knew I could get by on you, if I knew I could manipulate you, I would do it in a heartbeat. See, you never know where being that tough guy or that tough teacher may end up waking that boy up or that girl up at a point in a time in their life that'll change the whole course of their life. This is just a downward spiral. I was a competitor. I knew how to fight. I knew how to play. I knew how to win. I've never been on a losing team ever. And I turned all that focus and all that energy to a life of drugs. Every bit of it. Mr. Indiana All-Star, Mr. All-State, whatever, right? Now I'm working for the wrong side. With everything I got, I'm not going to just sell dime bags. I'm going to sell pounds. I don't want to just know the little guys. I want to know the big guys. See, I don't belong in the little class. I belong in the big class. And I look back at how God has trained us up from the beginning, from sending us to seminary and sending us to school and all those things. And I think back about our first chapel service that I ever did, and no one showed up. Not one person showed up. And God said, I gave you a message, but there's no one here. Because you've always wanted to be the big guy. You always want to be, right? Preach it anyway. Talk about humbling experiences. We led a life. I dragged my wife into a life where I was a player. I always piddled. I always sowed a little bit of weed. Before, when she came along, I wasn't into major dealings and stuff like that. I did eventually get into some heavier dealings and stuff towards the end of our life in the world. But I'd been arrested and all those things, man. It kind of settled me down, slowed me down a little bit anyway. I just thought that I'd get smarter. Is that what we do? We'll hold a job and it'll look good on paper, file taxes every year. It'll keep them off your back, You don't have people running in and out your front door. You always deliver away from your home, or you move to Tennessee and you grow weed in your basement and bring it to IU campus and sell it there. Still playing the system. Still playing the game. I have decided that I don't want to be known as a player anymore. I've decided that I want to be known as a preacher. And being known as a preacher doesn't mean that I have to have a congregation. It doesn't mean that I have to have an audience. I believe that we're all called to preach with our life.
That's right.
My life in itself should carry a message with it that will ring into people's hearts and into people's lives and into people's atmospheres and into people's environments. That says there's something about this individual. I don't feel like he's trying to get over on me. I don't really feel like he's trying to sell me a car. I don't really feel like he's trying to sell me some false hope about this thing about God. And it's either you want it or you don't, but at the same time, man, I know what I want. It's God's desire that we live as one new man, as one new woman. It's God's desire that we know what peace is. It's God's desire that we begin to understand what true, genuine prosperity is. It's God's desire that we know how to put our faith in the right things, that we rightfully divide life itself, in the physical, in the spiritual, in the eternal. I mean, God, I'm still learning, right? I'm still learning how to use the physical to lead men to want the spiritual. Because it's the spiritual in the end that's really going to make the difference. It's the spiritual in the end that's really going to, have the eternal benefit. But yet understanding that I have a call and a purpose on this life, on this planet, on this earth, for this time and for this season. And I want to be known as a good man. I want to have a good name. I want Paul to be able to write me a letter. Say, young David, oh man of God. I mean, that's the goals in life now, is to have a good name, a godly name. The book of Proverbs says that in chapter 4, verse 26, it says, give careful thought to the paths for your feet, yes, and be steadfast in all your ways. And when guys come to me and ask me questions about their future, about permission for any one thing, and it may be something very small, it may be something very little, it may not even be something that's sinful or anything of that nature, I almost always will say, let me think. You'll hear a judge say, let me take that under advisement. In other words, let me go back and look at this from the book perspective. Let me research this and make sure that I don't give the wrong counsel, the wrong advice, or the wrong suggestions, or the wrong hope. Let me just give some thought to it. There's nothing wrong with thinking some things out. Because if I have to be careful about where my feet go, and then God puts a responsibility as a preacher onto your life, that means there's going to be listeners in your life, and that means there's going to be people looking to you for direction and for counsel and for permission sometimes, because they're learning to hear from God and learning to hear from the Word. So that means the responsibility that when they come to you and ask you, I want to think this thing out. And what that does for the individual then, though, too, is it models for them to not be so hasty. It models for them to be careful of the thoughts that their feet's going to be taking. Because when we say yes, we say yes. When we say no, we say no. Let our yes be yes and our no be no. So that's where steadfastness comes in. When they come to us and offered us the house at W Street, we put it before the Lord and we prayed over it and we put some options on the table and we said, if you give us this house, these are the things that we possibly could do with it, but this is what we're saying yes to if you give it to us. And when they give it to us, that means we said yes. That means we're going to be steadfast. But we thought it out. We thought it out. We thought it out. We've been thinking it out for a long time as we've been going through the process of this house. And we're thinking it out the way that we laid it out on paper and presented it to them from the beginning, because our word means something. Abraham Lincoln said, Be sure you put your feet in the right place. And young people, if I could tell you anything about Honest Abe, that these words that he says right here, be sure you put your feet in the right place, I'm telling you, will save you a lot of heartache. He says, but he doesn't say, just be sure you're in the right place. Be sure you're in the right place. You know what you're there for. But what he says is, and then stand firm. I know who I am because I know who redeemed me. I know what I'm called to be, and I know where God wants me to go and what he wants me to do. He wants me to follow him. I'm not going to be moved from that. And that's where I had this attitude today with all the attacks that's been coming against Dave Walker. myself, my son, my wife, and other people and the ministry. And you know what, man? I'm tired of playing around with you, devil. The sicknesses that you guys went through last week, and the constant allergy attacks that keep coming through me. And come on, man. Tired of playing around, man. I want to believe that God can heal because He's a healer. I want to believe that we can have victory through His name because He's a victorious God. If I want to be a winner, then I follow the one that's going to win. If I want to be on the winning team, then I got to join the one that's got the winning team. So as a player, I lived for my own life, my own glory. But as a preacher, I believe we're all called to preach. I believe we're all called to be ministers. Our life should be saying something about what we believe and what we stand for. In Romans 10, verse 15, it says, "And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news." A timely word at a timely place in your life is one of the most beautiful things that you'll ever hear. When we're going through a major battle or major heartache or major crisis within our family and we go out to get counsel, we're looking for people that want to fight with us, not fight against us. I don't know about you, man, but I got enough people fighting against me. I got enough enemies that don't want to see us be successful. I'm looking for people that want to win. Well, I'm tired of being defeated and being beaten down, aren't you? I'm looking around for people that want to fight with us. And I think that's what we're supposed to model. In other words, if you're looking for people to fight with you, you better be willing to fight for somebody else. So if I fought for a couple of hundred other people's sons, then don't you tell me I don't have a right to fight for my own. I'm qualified to fight for sons and daughters. If there's anyone that's been called and qualified to fight and disciple men, I'm not anything or anybody. But you look at the studies and the case studies and the years that we've been doing what we've been doing. God has called us to preach. And He's called us to fight. And that's where I had to come to. I had to come to that place. If I'm called to fight for your son, if I'm called to fight for your family, then I'm called to fight for mine. And I think sometimes we forget about our very family. We get so busy doing other work or other things that we forget about the thing. You know what? If you two don't fight for your own marriage, right? If me and her don't fight, that's what I had to do a couple weeks ago. I had to say, hey, man, listen. Hey, we ain't taking any other commitments right now. Right now, I'm focusing on her. I'm fighting with her. I'm siding with her. That doesn't mean we ain't committed. That doesn't mean we're weak. That means we're just kind of prioritizing things for a little bit in our life. Because we can't let the enemy win. That's not an option. We can't let him win. And what he wants to do is divide and conquer. He wants to steal, kill, and destroy. He wants to stop the good things that God is trying to accomplish in and through all of our lives, working together as one new man and one new woman. That's right. So, as preachers, we are called to do discipleship. That means I'm not supposed to have a desire to hold on to you. I'm not supposed to have a desire to hold on to you to build a church or a congregation for myself. The Bible teaches me and tells me that I'm supposed to teach you the process of becoming a minister or a preacher for your own good and for the gospel and for the glory of God. That means the first thing that you need to do is you need to know that you are called. You need to know that you are a child of God. You need to know who your identity is, and you need to buy into what God is asking of you. And then you need to grow. Know and then grow. So for a season of your life, if you're called here to go through a season, we don't really necessarily want to keep you for the rest of your life. We don't want you to sign over your bank accounts. We don't want you to give us your money. We don't even want your money. We don't ask you for a deposit. We don't ask you for any of your money. You need to grow up into the things that God is preparing for your life to become. So you're knowing who you are, you're growing in who you are, and now you're going to show who you are. Your fruit is going to begin to show itself for what it is and what it is learning to be biblically. You're beginning to demonstrate the fruits of the Spirit that was given to you at this new birth, at this new place in life, when you didn't know who you was, you didn't know where you belonged, you didn't know where you was going to go, and now you're beginning to know, you're beginning to grow, and you're beginning to show the evidence that something radical has come into your heart and into your life and radically converted you and changed you, and you can't even explain it. And then, when the fruit begins to show itself, the evidence is real, it's genuine, it's time to go. Not to never be in relationship or fellowship or community with us ever again. That's not it. But it's time to go make disciples. That's right. Train them up. Prepare them, that they will know who they are and whose they are and in whom they belong to. See, we oftentimes look at, and I'm guilty, I look at the negative. I look at the ones that have failed or have fallen short. And the Bible says that only 1 out of 10 returned to give thanks. Only 5 out of 10 was wise. 5 was foolish. 1 was left and 1 was taken. The odds and the statistics that you're going to get a lot of people coming back to give you thanks, it's just probably not going to happen necessarily. But that doesn't mean that everything that you've given and everything that you've sown in and the seed that you've laid down isn't at some point and some time going to come to fruition someplace for somebody else, somewhere else. To see if I'm only concerned about what I get, then you know what I am? I'm still that player. I'm that individual player that was only worried about his points, his rebounds, his assists, and how many balls he knocked off the backboard. But if I'm a preacher, it's team statistics. I'm handing this one off to I don't even know who. But I know there's going to be someone else with feet that are just as beautiful, these feet that God created, that it's underneath these shoes right here, that's going to come along and snatch this young man up or this older man up. So, did I say something that made you laugh? Yeah. I'm just telling you what the Bible says. How beautiful are the feet. Spiritual. God calls us out of being a player, which I put a slash, and beside it I put pretender. He says, man, quit pretending. Quit playing. The responsibility is big. It's great. And the reason why we go through so many attacks, the reason why we go through so many trials is because God has value in you. And the reason why you men get to see Joy and I get attacked and go through, and you see me handle things absolutely the wrong way, isn't for you to handle it the way I did. It's for you to handle it better. Most of the lessons that I learned from preachers in my life was how not to do it. But to not stand back and be judgmental in the aspect that you know what, man, I mean, hey, we're men, we're fallen, we're broken, we're a mess, you know what I'm saying? And it's not an excuse. It's just reality. God is big and people are small. That's got to be my mindset. That's got to be my look. Not people are big and God is small. I can have mentors. I can have people in my life that help guide me and lead me and direct me and all that, but my focus has to stay on Jesus. You know, I wrote down some things that through my journey that really stood out that I can think back on and I can thank God for to this day. Because there was a period of time where I just really didn't know what to do. I just really didn't know how to live. I didn't know where to go. I mean, I didn't know who to turn to. Naturally coming from that lifestyle, you don't trust anyone. I mean, I'll use you and I'll take from you and I'll give to you and we'll have this, road dog kind of mentality and you're my bro and I'll never, you know what I mean, and all that. But it's all... You know it. We're just using each other. So I remember that God was teaching me that big time warriors, I was a warrior. God, you're asking me to walk away from this thing, that thing, and how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Always trying to figure God out and try to think ahead to what God will have to do to make this thing work, And God was teaching me that big time warriors become great worshipers. Because if I can take all that energy that I spent on worrying, man, about how God's going to try to sort this mess out and put that energy towards worshiping Him, come on.
That's good.
God was teaching me that players can become good preachers. They can become good preachers because they've got the discipline instilled in them. They've got the fundamentals instilled in them. They've got the work ethic instilled in them. They've got the team aspect put into them. They know what it means to come under. They know what it means to listen to instructions. They know what it means to run a set. They know what it means to be in the right position. They know what it means to be in the right place. They know what it means to not turn the ball over. They know what it means to get the rebound. They know what it means to block out and do it well and do it right. They know what all that means. They just need to figure out how to direct it and channel it in the right way. See, I relate to athletes. When God sends athletic people here or had an athletic past, I can relate to them. I also understand and know that we have some tools that we can tap into. We have some areas in their life. I relate to men that have been through the military. Because there's something that's already been rooted and grounded into them. Now we just got to channel it into the right perspectives, into the right thinking, and into the right direction for the right reason. I'd take many drives. I'd just get in my car and drive and ask God to show me. Just show me things. Show me. And He was always bringing things from my past before my eyes. And He was teaching me that, David, you can't pretend the past isn't there. It's there. Face it. You want to be a preacher, you got to face the things that have come against you your whole life, and you got to face them right. I call that facing my past. Moses had to go back after 40 years, and he had to face his past. But he knew he was called to do something. And it drove him and motivated him to get past the failure of his past so he could get to the promise of his future. I don't care how long it's been since you murdered someone. To have to go back to the same place, even if it's been 40 years later and the leadership's changed and the government's different and the people are, some are passed on and some aren't, man, it's still going to be difficult. But it's needful. Your past doesn't determine your future. I remember driving to my dad's grave. My dad died in 2000. Been 19 years. Me and my dad wasn't ever on really good terms except at about the time that he died. I thank God for that. Because I was a horrible son. And for 19 years, I've been without a father on this earth. We never really agreed about much, and we never communicated about anything hardly at all. But God took me in my car, and He had me walk to His grave. And as a son, I had to face the way I treated him. I needed to do that to be a preacher. I never honored my father. And I committed to him that I would honor my mother for the rest of her days the best that I could. Because he had spent 30 years with her. They had fought me tooth and nail almost my whole upbringing. And it wasn't until he was gone that I realized what I'd had. My sins were forever before my eyes. Still to this day, God will bring a thought of something that I did to someone that I know is already under the blood. It's already forgiven by God, but God will put it in my mind. And I think He just does it to just check us so that we can say, oh my God, Lord, I can't believe I treated that person like that. It's been 40 years ago, man. I can remember how I did things to kids in elementary, junior high. And it's not a constant barrage or anything, but just every now and then, my sins are before my eyes. And it helps me to be so grateful to such a loving God that come into my life and said, man, you're such a pretender. You're such a player. You've been pathetic and ridiculous to people. You have hurt so many people, but I want to soften you up, man. I know He's real. And I know that my identity is found in Him. And I'll never forget the morning that He woke me up out of bed and asked me to do a couple of things for Him. This was at a time in my life where, God, what do you want from me? I'd walked away from my job. I'd walked away from my livelihood, from my trade. I was in the process of getting rid of properties and giving back all the things that we had taken wrongfully. And it's early in the morning. My wife's working at Johnny's Junctions, cooking chicken. And I'm kind of just trying to figure out who I am. What my identity is. And I'll never forget what God asked me to do. He asked me to get up, go ask my wife for permission, go to Oakland City University, sign up for school, and then go to the library and get a book on Martin Luther King. And to some people, you may say, big deal. It may not be that big of a deal to some, but to me, it was the first time that I really got good direction from God, and I had to obey it because it wasn't going to be like just given to me. I was going to have to put some effort into this thing. The first thing I had to do was go ask my wife for permission to not have a job. Come on. She's frying chicken, man. I just walked away from a trade that I could still go back to. It was the union. I could go to work any time I wanted. If I wanted to do it my way, right? I remember going to Oakland City University and sitting down with that woman across the table from me. Her name was Stephanie. And she said, well, do you have any money? I said, nope. She said, do you have any plans? I said, nope. I said, God just asked me to come here. You tell me what I'm doing here. She said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a minister. I feel like God's calling me to preach. She said, well, that's cool. We offer a religious studies program here. Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. So you mean I can go to college, go to school, and take Bible classes? She said, yeah. I said, sign me up. I know why God woke me up now. I didn't know they provided that type of studies. So as the process went on there, it was going to be happening pretty quick because the semester was starting pretty fast. So it was a matter of getting FAFSAs filed and all this kind of stuff. And comes to find out, I can pretty much go to school for free. Waiting on transcripts and all this. I go to Crossroads one day talking to Dr. Reed Renner's husband. I said, this is what God told me to do, and this is where we're at. My transcripts haven't got here from Illinois, and if they don't get here by tomorrow at this time, then I'm out until next semester. He said, what are you doing here? I said, well, I figured if they make it on time, it's God's will. He said, did God tell you to go? I said, God told me to go. He said, then why don't you go to Illinois and get your transcripts? Oftentimes we put these things before God and we say, well, if this, and this happens, then I'll do it. And God said, well, what you going to do? I'm not saying we don't wait on him. We don't allow him to move. But if he told you something and he wants you to do something, then do what you got to do to make that something happen. I left the school that day and I went to the library. I knew Martin Luther King had a dream. That's about all I knew about Martin Luther King. Right? And so I go to the lady at the desk. I said, I'm here because God told me to come here and get a book on Martin Luther King Jr. And she just kind of looked at me like, okay. So I get a book that's just basically a general biography, man, of the civil rights movement. And as I began to read that, I began to understand the parallels of being free. And that's what ended up being the title of my book. Free at last. Good God Almighty, free at last. And just to sum it up, God just loves to do little things just to show you his love for our obedience. And,
Yes, he does.
After being there for about 3 months, the chaplain resigned and the president come and asked me if I would consider taking the chaplaincy position. And I thought about it. I prayed about it, and I felt like God wanted me to have this as an opportunity, as a training lesson. So I took it, and the very first chapel where I was being in the position of being a chaplain was, I didn't even realize it until like that night or that evening, but it was on Martin Luther King Jr.'s day. It's just little things like that that God wants to do for you and for your life, to put you into the position to where He can use you. So when I talk about being free, this is what I mean. This is what I mean by being free at last. I know who I am. It doesn't mean I don't get attacked, and it doesn't mean that we don't have struggles, and it doesn't mean that we don't fall down. But just when an attack will come and you have no place else to go, you know where your help comes from. And there's nothing more freeing than knowing that, yeah, I'm surrounded by you. It may seem like the enemy has finally got me. No way out. But the enemy can't surround me because I'm surrounded by God's protection. So I compel you to follow God's desire for your life. Whatever has happened to you that is seemingly unfair, unjust, or unethical, give it to Jesus and allow Him to bring your dreams to life through whatever path He chooses. The promises of God are true, and the desire of God for your life is much more fulfilling than if we was to continue to follow our own desires.